Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a fascinating case study in development. It's both a massive success story and at the same time, a bit of a warning sign.
It is.
We're diving into the complex profile of the Indian state of Haryana.
And it's an absolutely crucial state to study. When you look at the national rankings, Haryana really stands out. We're talking a robust economy, high per capita income, really consistent growth rates.
Because of its location.
Largely, yes. But, and this is the key thing, when you move beyond those economic metrics, you find this contradiction. And it's a challenge you see a lot globally. High wealth existing right alongside these deep, persistent structural stresses.
And that's the paradox we want to unpack for you today. The sources you share just lay this out so perfectly, a region that's so economically vital, yet at the same time, it's struggling really intensely with core social and environmental indicators. So our mission is to examine these specific intertwined challenges, economic, social, and environmental, to really understand why rapid growth on its own doesn't guarantee inclusive, sustainable development.
It really boils down to a single question. Can the capacity of government and, social institutions, can it keep pace with the sheer velocity of wealth generation?
And the answer is often no.
Often no.
Okay, so let's start with that success story. We hear so much about Haryana's phenomenal economic achievements. Can you just quickly lay out the strengths of its economic base for us? And then let's jump straight to the flip side. What are the big structural social challenges living alongside that success?
The economic strength is, it's undeniable. Haryana has one of the highest per capita incomes in the country. It's got a robust, diversified economy.
Yeah.
We're talking major manufacturing hubs, a huge services sector.
A real powerhouse.
It is. And crucially, its real gross state domestic product, the GSDP, has consistently grown faster than the national average for the last decade. It's an engine of economic dynamism.
So if you're just looking at the raw economic numbers, it's a stellar performance. But is there a risk here that this on-paper success is kind of masking a larger unfunded social liability that the state is building up?
That is precisely the tension the sources highlight. The wealth generation has been immense, but it just hasn't translated into corresponding improvements in certain social outcomes. What's so fascinating is how this economic strength coexists with these really severe social challenges.
And where do we see that most clearly?
The most immediate and critical administrative focus is the sex ratio of birth.
The long-standing gender imbalance issue.
Correct. And the data is pretty sobering. Despite, sustained serious enforcement actions and a lot of policy pushes, the ratio, while it has improved, it stood at around 923 girls per 1,000 boys in 2025. And that number is significantly and persistently below the national average.
A ratio of 923. That tells you two things at once, doesn't it? It says that a huge policy effort is being made, but also that the outcome is still deeply, deeply problematic. What does a skewed ratio like that actually mean for a society in the long run?
Well, it suggests that economic prosperity just hasn't been enough to dislodge decades, maybe even centuries, of these deep-rooted societal preferences and norms. And for the economy, a persistent gender imbalance affects everything.
Like what?
From future demographic stability to the quality and even the availability of the labor pool. You're creating immense social costs down the line.
And the data shows this isn't even a uniform problem across the state, right?
Yeah.
It varies.
Absolutely. That average of 923 hides these massive regional disparities. Districts like Rohtak and Rewari, for instance, they're still lagging significantly behind the state average. That tells you where those deep social norms are most resilient.
So it's not just a political goal.
Not at all. Bridging these gaps is a core critical task for the administration because the alternative is just highly unstable social development.
You also mentioned other gaps, specifically around labor. If Haryana is such a high-growth, high-income state, shouldn't we see women participating fully in that economic engine?
Logically, you would think so. But we see these persistent gaps in female labor force participation. When you compare Haryana to other Indian states, its participation rate often lags.
And that's just an economic inefficiency.
It's a huge economic inefficiency. You are, in effect, excluding half of your potential talent pool from contributing to that GSDP you were just praising. It means the economic boom is specialized, it's concentrated, and it's not inclusive.
That sets up our second point perfectly. If that engine of growth is specialized, where's the fuel coming from? And this is where geography comes in. A massive part of Haryana's story is its proximity to Delhi, part of the national capital region. How has that adjacency been such a powerful driver, and what unique governance challenges has it created?
The location is the single greatest external advantage the state has, no question.
In what way?
Districts like Gurugram, Faridabad, Sonapad, they're right on Delhi's doorstep. And they have just transformed into these massive centers for global commerce. This proximity has spurred gargantuan investment, employment, infrastructure.
We hear terms like special economic zones, SEZs, a lot with this. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, are we basically talking about areas with streamlined regulations and tax incentives that just act like magnets for investment near a big city like Delhi?
That's exactly right. SEZs are designed to be these fast-track regulatory islands, just minimizing the red tape. And they are highly effective. They draw in massive corporate interest. This is why the NCR acts as this enormous economic multiplier for Haryana. It creates jobs and opportunity at an incredible speed.
Okay, speed feels like the key word there. Does the sheer pace of this urbanization create a kind of governance vacuum? Are these local institutions, municipal councils, planning bodies, are they just completely overwhelmed?
That's the perfect analogy. This high-speed, high-density growth places immense pressure on governance. Rapid urbanization has severely strained planning capabilities, service delivery, everything.
So infrastructure can't keep up.
Infrastructure often lags, and crucially, the urban institutions themselves just struggle to keep pace with demand.
So what's the most critical pressure point that we're seeing emerge from this institutional lag?
The environment. The sources really highlight this. The most critical immediate pressure point is air quality, specifically in those urban areas that are growing so fast.
I've seen the headlines.
For instance, recent trends showed urban air quality in places like Gurugram saw a significant rise in PM 2.5 levels in late 2025. It actually reached the worst level recorded in nearly a decade.
When you say worst levels in nearly a decade, what does that actually mean for someone living there? Is it just a number on a chart, or is it fundamentally changing daily life?
Well, it's impacting everything. At that level, we're talking about severe public health risks. You have forced school closures, interruptions to construction, massive impacts on just visibility and respiratory health. It is an immediate, tangible failure that affects millions of people every single day.
And that spike points directly to what?
It points directly to gaps in both proactive environmental regulation and, frankly, the sheer capacity of urban planning to manage waste, traffic, and industrial emissions.
So the dilemma for an administrator is pretty stark. You're benefiting hugely from being next to Delhi, but that benefit is simultaneously poisoning the air your citizens breathe and overwhelming your city's services.
Precisely. The core challenge for the administration is strengthening urban governance, planning, and environmental regulation so that the pace of economic growth doesn't just outrun the institutional capacity to manage it sustainably. It needs an investment in capacity that's proportional to the rate of growth.
It sounds like the state is racing against itself. Okay, let's shift gears a bit from the urban pressures to the rural and resource side. Historically, agriculture was a huge strength, but we're seeing serious environmental damage now, particularly with water. Can you detail the water crisis in Haryana and how it connects back to agriculture policy?
Yeah, agriculture has been the backbone of the state for decades, securing food security. But the methods used have caused profound environmental stress, and water scarcity is the most severe.
And this is policy-driven.
This crisis is largely driven by policy, specifically subsidies that encourage water-intensive cropping. Rice cultivation, for example, is extremely taxing on water resources, especially in this climate.
And what's the specific impact on the water table from these kinds of practices?
The data it's alarming. Groundwater levels have plummeted dramatically. About 47% of over 7,400 villages in Haryana are now classified as water stressed.
Wow, almost half.
And in many districts, the aquifers are depleting beyond sustainable limits. This isn't just an environmental problem. It's a direct threat to the long-term economic viability of the entire agricultural sector.
The state can't afford to let that happen. The sources mention a large-scale initiative, the Integrated Water Resources Action Plan. There's a staggering target, conserving up to 6 lakh crore liters of water by 2027. Can you help us visualize how much 6 lakh crore liters is?
That number is just immense. To put it in context, lakh is 100,000, a crore is 10 million. We're talking about 6 trillion liters of water.
6 trillion.
It's the volume of water needed to fill millions of Olympic-sized swimming pools. Reaching that goal requires a massive systemic change across the entire agricultural sector.
That kind of scale demands big policy shifts, not just small fixes.
Absolutely. The methods they're using are comprehensive. Large-scale rainwater harvesting, regulating extraction, and critically, crop diversification incentives to steer farmers away from those really thirsty crops like rice.
So there's an understanding that water is capital.
Yes, that resource management has to be integrated directly into economic planning.
So let's tie this back to the social dimension we started with, the gender imbalance, the social norms. When a resource like water becomes scarce, who usually bears the biggest burden of that scarcity?
Well, that burden often falls disproportionately on women who are traditionally responsible for household water collection. But more broadly, the same deep-seated social norms that keep female labor participation low are often the same norms that make the agricultural sector resistant to environmental change.
How so?
If a society prioritizes short-term yields and traditional methods, which are often tied to male landholding, it makes it much harder to implement necessary reforms like crop diversification. That requires social buy-in.
So we have this perfect storm, water depletion driven by unsustainable economic policy, meeting these deep-seated social norms, all against a backdrop of explosive urbanization driven by the NCR, which is now dealing with toxic air.
They're all fundamentally intertwined.
The issues aren't separate.
That's the essential insight. These aren't separate silos for different departments to handle. The economic success driven by the NCR creates the demands that stress the resources and strain governance. And the failure to address entrenched social norms like gender imbalance makes it harder to implement the necessary administrative and resource management solutions in the first place.
So what does this all mean for someone listening who wants to be well-informed about regional development? It really sounds like Haryana is a perfect, if very complex, case study of what happens when rapid, specialized economic growth meets decades of unresolved social and environmental issues.
That's the core thesis from the sources, yes. To sustain that high economic growth that Haryana is rightly known for, the state administration needs simultaneous integrated efforts in three very distinct but intensely interconnected areas.
Okay, let's summarize those three areas for clarity.
1, bridging those major social gaps. We're talking the sex ratio and low female labor participation. These are the indicators of whether growth is truly inclusive and sustainable for the long haul.
Right.
2, strengthening urban governance, planning, and environmental regulation, especially on air quality and the municipal capacity needed to manage that unprecedented urbanization from the NCR.
Okay, and 3?
And 3, implementing comprehensive integrated resource management to tackle the acute water scarcity that's been caused by intensive agricultural practices.
So it's clear the solution isn't just about building more roads or more factories. It's about institutional reform and social change.
Exactly. The challenges are intertwined. You can't truly fix the water crisis without changing agricultural norms and policies, and you can't have truly sustainable economic growth without addressing that severe gender disparity. It demands a multi-pronged approach that tackles social change right alongside infrastructure and resource planning.
Thank you. That was a brilliant guide through the sources, synthesizing these incredibly complex challenges into such actionable insights.
My pleasure. It's a compelling region to watch.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to explore further. If proximity to a megacity like Delhi acts as this immense economic multiplier, what governance models would be needed to ensure that the benefits of that growth, and not just the pressures, are equally distributed across diverse districts? Specifically, how do you make sure that districts that are lagging on social indicators like Rohtak and Rewari actually benefit from the economic powerhouse next door without simply absorbing the megacity's environmental and social stresses?
That is the ultimate question of regional equity and stability.
Something to mull over as you think about the future of global urban centers. We hope this deep dive helps you use this information to inform your own perspective on complex regional development. Until next time.